This is an external hard drive that comes pre-installed with thousands of ROMs, all the emulators to play them, and a nice looking emulation frontend that you can buy and start using to play your old favorite retro games. And it runs from Windows. What voodoo is this? Well, stick around and I'll tell you. Hello there, how you doing? I'm TechDweeb, welcome, thanks for clicking on the video today. I made a video recently about this, the Hyper Base BC2. It's a 2TB Batocera hard drive full of ROMs and emulators. That's right, you can use the PC that you already have to emulate a ton of old retro systems, and if you have a gaming PC, you can actually upscale even the higher end stuff like PS2 and GameCube. It's pretty cool, but there's just one problem. With this, you need to boot to this drive. You can't just run it from Windows. It's a Linux-based operating system on here. So the only way you can use it is to boot to it. So you can't use your computer to do Windows stuff at the same time, like watch your favorite YouTube channel, TechDweeb, on your second monitor, or Alt-Tab back and forth between your Excel spreadsheet when your boss is looking, or quickly click the Start menu to open up a browser and look up a walkthrough for your game because you're a baby. You know, all that stuff that you can do in Windows, but you can't do if you boot your computer from a Linux-based Batocera emulation drive. Well, what if I told you that this hard drive right here, this Hyper Base RB2, is just like this one, with all the emulators and games and frontend all set up and ready to use, but this drive is actually a program that you can run from Windows. You think I'm lying? What the heck, man? You're gonna come into my video and call me a liar to my face? Oh, you wanna fight, punk? You wanna go? Wanna go? Let's go, bro. Right now. Yeah, that's what I thought. Alright, let's get on with the video. This whole setup is by a company called JMacken. I've reviewed their products before. They sent me that Batocera hard drive, if you recall, that I checked out in this video. I'll link to that below if you want to know more about that product. This is their Windows version. It's a 2TB hard drive full of emulators and games, and it uses Retrobat, which is an amazing, awesome front-end program for Windows. Of course, I made a video about Retrobat. I'll link to that below if you want to know more, or set it up yourself. Before we plug this in and see what it can do, let's take a look at what we get, because we get more than the drive itself. We also get some controllers and a case to hold everything. The controllers are okay, sort of awkward shaped. They feel a little weird. They feel kind of like they're made from an era before we figured out the best shapes for controllers. That's the best way I could describe it. The main complaint is that the D-pads are buttons instead of proper D-pads, but they work okay. However, they're not good for fighting games. Only about a 50% success rate with my Hadoukens. The analog sticks work good though, and I tend to use those more than the D-pads anyways, to be honest. Overall, for cheap controllers, I kinda like them as long as I'm not using the D-pad, but they're not gonna blow you away. They look nice though, and hey, if you don't like these controllers, just use whatever controller you want. As long as it works with your PC and Windows, it'll probably work with this Retrobat system. You're not stuck with anything. And it's cool that they give us a case to hold everything. It's a great way to keep everything together and make it all portable. And onto the drive itself. It looks kinda meh. It is not very special looking. Not like that other drive, the Batocera drive. That looked like an old audio cassette. This one just looks like a hard drive. Because it is. It's just a 2.5-inch SATA hard drive in a see-through external case. It does have an integrated USB cord and a built-in USB-A to USB-C adapter. That's kinda cool. It's just a shame that they didn't do something more interesting with the look of the device. Even just like a different logo or sticker or something would have made a big difference. I mean, I know it doesn't really matter what the hard drive looks like, but after the last one, I got kind of spoiled. I want my stuff to look like stuff. Is that so much to ask? Alright, enough dawdling. Let's get this plugged into my PC and see what we get, shall we? It's super easy to get going. All you gotta do is plug in the controller and plug in the drive. It should pop up and show you the files, and then you can open the Retrobat folder and start up Retrobat. It loads up nice and quick, and then you're good to go. It runs great. The controllers work just fine right away. It seems like it's all set up and ready to go. So for the rest of the footage, I'm gonna switch to my display capture so that you can see everything all nice and clearly. So if you're not familiar with Retrobat, I'll give you a quick tour. It's really simple. You can browse through your game systems there, shown on the right. you can enter into a system and view the games for that system. So here, if I go into Nintendo 64, you can see all our Nintendo 64 games listed there. And you can cycle through, and each game has a little description with box art and screenshot. You can press A to open the game, and boom, there you go. You're playing Cruising USA. It's running great, and you can save your state by holding the hotkey, which is the select button, and pressing X, and you can load your state by holding the hotkey and pressing Y. And then you can get into the RetroArch options if you need to do that by pressing the hotkey and B, and you can exit the game by pressing the hotkey and start. Also, while you're at the games list, you can press select, go down to advanced system options, and set whatever options you want for the emulation of the system that you're in. So this is where you'll be able to turn the bezel artwork on and off, or turn on some sort of a shader to make it look like an old CRT, or change the emulator that's used for whatever reason, or select your upscaling options. So if you wanted to play Nintendo 64 in 4K, this is where you can do it, along with a bunch of other options. They're different for each emulator and each system. You can also add games to a favorites list by holding the Y button. And that's the basics of Retrobat, so let's go through the list of systems so that you can see what's on here. I'm going to do this quick. You can pause the video or watch it at slower speed if you're really curious what's on here. Basically, everything on here you could ever want. If you loved the Atari 2600 or the Commodore 64 or the Amiga, TurboGrafx 16, NES, Game & Watch, Game Boy Advance, Super Nintendo, Sega, all that older stuff's on here. But for higher end 3D systems, we have PS1, Nintendo 64, Nintendo DS, Wii, Nintendo 3DS, Sega Saturn, Sega Dreamcast, PS1, PS2, PSP, and there's even a secret system on here that isn't shown in the Retrobat menu. I'll show you that in a bit. Now, before I get into the nitty-gritty of this device, I just want to touch on why I think that this device, or these sorts of devices, emulation drives, or Android boxes, or Raspberry Pis, or whatever, these things that come preloaded with all your games, all set up and ready to go, they are just freaking awesome. I've said this many times on the channel, but I'll say it again here, why not? It's an amazing experience being able to access all the old retro games that you love from when you were a teenager, or a kid, or a baby. Whatever system you loved, it's probably on here. Were you a Sinclair ZX Spectrum little dweeb? Well, you have that here. Was Game Boy your main system when you met your first girlfriend, Melissa, who you asked to hang out with you until you had your first kiss, and then it was super awkward and you never spoke to each other again? Well, you got every Game Boy game ever made here. And so many of these systems and games are still great today. Heck, lots of these games are the freaking greatest games ever made. And you have them all here at your fingertips. And this is 2 terabytes of games. Thousands and thousands of games, even newer games. Because this drive runs from Windows on whatever PC that you plug it into, you get some really amazing experience in the newer 3D retro systems. You can play Tony Hawk's on the PS1 upscaled to 4K, or GameCube, or Nintendo Wii, or PS2, or PSP, or Dreamcast, or Sega Saturn, with all the conveniences of modern emulation, being able to save your save states, add your own games. If the game you wasn't included, you can just add it. I'll show you that in a bit. And of course, since this is a Windows-based device, you just plug it into your PC and start up Retrobat right from Windows without having to mess around with external devices or booting to Batocera. Just plug it in, start it up, play your games, pause it, and Alt-Tab over to Facebook when your mom sends you a meme that only a boomer would find funny. Alt-Tab back over to your game, save the game, and send the save file to your friend. Whatever. All the convenience of running emulation in Windows. You have that here. And it's all completely set up, pre-configured, ready to go. That's freaking awesome. And I should mention, in case it wasn't obvious, that if you try to run this on your computer, unless your computer is freaking ancient and basically garbage, even an older, slower PC will have no problem playing all the old stuff. All your Sega, your SNES, probably PS1, and Nintendo 64, no issues running any of that stuff. I made a video showing you what sort of emulation performance you can expect on a very old, slow PC. I'll include a link to that in the description below if you want to watch it after this video, of course. But for the higher end stuff like PS2, or GameCube, or Dreamcast, or PSP, or Wii, or 3DS, the performance of that stuff will depend on what sort of PC that you're running this on. So if you have a budget gaming PC with a graphics card, you probably expect to play pretty much everything at least native resolution, and probably upscale to 1080p. And if you have a somewhat decent gaming PC with a mid-range GPU, like if you can play new-ish PC games at 1080p, 60 FPS, then you should have no problem upscaling anything here to 1440p or 4K. That's why I love these hard drive based emulation systems over the Android Android boxes, because you can emulate way more stuff with even a budget gaming PC than you ever could on a cheap, underpowered Android box. Don't get me wrong, I love those Android boxes. They're cheap and easy and offer great performance for the price, but if you have a PC that can play games, why not just take advantage of the horsepower that you already have and use that? So that's the general stuff. Now let's get into some specifics. My main praise, and also my main criticism for this thing, is the game lists. I'll start with the good news. We have 2 terabytes of games here. Most of that is higher end 3D games, because those are way bigger than older games. I'll include a link to the games list of this device in the description below if you want to know if your favorite games are on here. My new favorite trick, recommended to me by my good buddy from my Discord server, that I'm totally going to steal and say it's my own idea from now on. On devices like this, if you want to see how complete the ROM collection is, do a search for Doom and see if it has all the versions of Doom that you'd expect. And here, yeah, that's all the Doom I'd want to see. SNES, Sega 32X, Saturn, PS1, Game Boy Advance, Nintendo 64, even the weird ones like Jaguar and 3DO. So that's a good sign. And a quick glance through the game lists of the higher end systems is actually very promising. We got 517 Nintendo 64 games, with barely any duplicates. An amazing system for emulation. It runs great on almost any PC, and looking through this list, I didn't see anything missing that I'd want to play. And it plays great, just fine. 36 GameCube games. Not very many of those. Missing some of my personal favorites, but you can add your own games. If there's a game that you want that isn't on here, I'll show you that in a bit. Still, lots of good games on here. All the Mario games and Zelda that you'd want are on here, and they all play great. This is a gaming PC that I'm using this on, and I can upscale to 4K, no problem at all. 20 Wii games, so just a few of those. Again, all the Mario stuff is on here, and these run in the same emulator as the GameCube games, the Dolphin emulator. I've upscaled to 4K here, running no problem at all. 465 3DS games. Wow, this actually seems like a very extensive list. Hey, they've got all the Adventure Time games. Look, Finn, it's you. I personally don't think playing 3DS games is ideal on a big screen. You can do it. It works if there's a game you want to play. It's just not as comfortable as having just a big full screen, single screen, widescreen game. Probably better just to play those on a 3DS or a 2DS or whatever. 304 Sega Saturn games. So not all the Sega Saturn games, not nearly all. But again, it's a good list here. Everything I'd want to play. It runs just fine. 327 Dreamcast games, and of course they're running just fine. They run great. Everything on here runs great. It's all pre-configured, ready to go. You just fire it up and it just starts up and runs perfect. There's no issues with any of the emulation as far as I can see. 1,469 PS1 games. That's a freaking ton of PS1 games. They're mostly North American or European releases without a ton of duplicates. So I'm very happy to see that. PS1 is such a great system to emulate just because there's so many great PS1 games. And it runs like a dream. Even on like a lower end gaming PC or maybe a higher end office PC, you can upscale PS1 to 4K, no problem. If you're into that. I personally like playing at the native resolution of PS1, Sega Saturn, those kind of systems. But I know lots of people like to upscale them, so you can do that, no problem. 22 PS2 games. Not as many as I'd like to see, but PS2 games are several gigabytes each, and the library is freaking huge, so it's understandable that they couldn't include hundreds of those on a 2 terabyte drive. There's some good games in this list though, and hey, you're always free to add your own games if your favorite is missing. The PS2 emulator does run really good on a wide variety of computers, but if you're going to be upscaling, you're going to need at least a mid-range gaming PC if you want to upscale PS2 to 4K. That's what I've learned about this system. 292 PSP games. Although, this is a very lackluster PSP collection. Pretty much none of them are actual PSP games. They're all PSP mini games, which are basically like small downloadable games for the PSP, like mobile games, which is a bummer. I'd have preferred they put none of these PSP mini games on here and put a small selection of really good, real PSP games. I guess they gotta pad out the games list though. Speaking of which, it's time to address the elephant in the room. And in this case, the elephant is a games list that is pretty deceiving. They're marketing this as over 10,000 games. It says so on all their marketing, and yeah, when you look at the menu, it's over 100,000 games. But That's only because there's a ton of duplicates. Pretty much all the older systems have multiple copies of the same game for nearly every single game. So you want to play Adventure Construction Set on the Apple II? Well, you can't here because they have 6 copies of it. Is your favorite game on the Atari 2600 Adventure? Well, there's 16 copies of that. Nintendo, full of duplicates. Game Boy, full of duplicates. Pretty much all these old systems are just full of duplicates. Some of the duplicates are justified, maybe, because they are the same game, but from different regions. So here, Baby T-Rex on the Game Boy, we can see they gave us the North American version, the European version, and the Japanese version. So maybe you can make the case that this is more of a complete collection because they give you all the versions, but that's not even true because lots of these are literally duplicate copies of the exact same game. Like 1943 on the NES, we have the USA version, and then the Japanese beta version, and then the Japanese version, and then the Japanese version again with a slightly different file name. I'd estimate that if you took out all the duplicates, you'd probably be closer to 50,000 games rather than 100,000 games. And don't get me wrong, that's still a lot of games. It's still totally worth buying because of the amount of games. I just wish these companies would take the time to curate their game libraries so that we don't have to do it ourselves. And just don't market the device as having 100,000 games if more than half of them are just duplicates. As for adding your own games, well, I guess I'll show you that now. So one of my favorite GameCube games is the Incredible Hulk, but that's not included here. So I can open up the Retrobat drive folder, go into the ROM directory, and then into the GameCube directory, and copy my game right into there. This hard drive isn't jam-packed. There's about 100 gigabytes free, so you have enough space to add some more of your games. And if you want, you can delete some of the games that you don't care about to clear up more space. For example, here in GameCube, there are 10 NBA games on here. I don't need 10 NBA games. I don't even need one NBA game. So I can delete those to clear up some space if I wanted to. Anyways, once your new game is added, just go back to Retrobat in the GameCube section, press Start to bring up the main menu, go into Game Settings, and select Update Game Lists. After that, your new game should show up and you can start it up. You won't have any box art or screenshots for the game though. If you want that, you'll need to use the built-in scraper. It's built into Retrobat. I'm not going to show you how to do that here because I already showed you how to do that in this video. Linked below. Check that out if you want to know more about scraping your game art in Retrobat. But you don't need to scrape the game art to play the game, so that's totally optional. 2 terabytes is lots of games, but there's probably hundreds of terabytes of like GameCube and PS2 games alone, so it's understandable that they had to pick and choose which games to include, and they couldn't please everyone, so it's nice that we can add our own games, and it's very easy to do. And one more quick thing, as I was poking through the files on this device like a detective, I actually found that there's a secret PS3 emulator on here. It doesn't show up in Retrobat for whatever reason, but it's there. It's the RPCS3 emulator, and you can start that up right from the folder, and there are 3 PS3 games on here they included that you can play, and they work good. Here I am playing Ridge Racer 7, and it starts up fine, plays fine. It's a shame they didn't include this in the main game list. Maybe there's a reason they didn't, but it's there, hiding in the files of the drive. Let's just keep this our little secret, okay? So, what do I think of this thing? And do I recommend it? Well, I freaking love it, and yes, I do recommend it. I highly recommend it. I have a few minor complaints, but the pros far outweigh the cons. The main reason I'm actually very happy to have this compared to my other devices is that it can be run from Windows. You don't have to reboot your computer into Batocera or use a separate dedicated Android device or whatever. It's just your regular PC that you already have. Plug this in, fire it up. It's all set up and configured and ready to go with all the convenience of any of those retro emulation devices, but you also have all the convenience of being able to use Windows at the same time, play YouTube in the background, adjust your volume, use whatever controller you want, record your screen, alt tab over to Facebook Marketplace and search for used mining GPUs while you wait for your game cutscene to finish. You know, I have lots of emulation devices, Android boxes, retro handhelds, Batocera hard drives, and this. Running my emulation right in Windows with Retrobat as the front end on my main PC is my all-time favorite way to play retro games. I've been doing it this way for ages, even before I got this drive, before I even made my YouTube channel. This is how I like to do it right from Windows. But buying this drive means you don't have to do any of this yourself. It's basically plug and play. And that's where the real value of this thing comes from, I think. It's all the work done for you. You get all the games you can ever want from the old system, a ton of newer 3D games, the ability to add your own games. They all run great on the PC because my PC is a good gaming PC, and they're all set up and pre-configured. Easy to change the settings, upscale, or whatever you want to do. It's just so easy and convenient. And even if you have some emulation set up on your PC, this is still a great choice because it's portable. I haven't talked about this yet, but it's actually a big factor in why a device like this is great, even for power users like you and me. Even more so because it comes with a nice case to hold everything together. You can keep all your games, all your settings, all your save games on one single external drive. So if you have multiple PCs, you can use this on your main PC when you should be working, but instead you're playing Burger Time, and then bring it with you and use it on your laptop and continue right where you left off in Chrono Trigger, and then bring it to your friend's house to play Mario Party with all the stuff that you've already unlocked. It's like having all your retro games together in one place on a hard drive, because that's what it is. I'll include links below if you want to pick one of these up. I don't get any sort of commission or anything, by the way. I'm just showing it to you because I think it's a good product and the company has been good to communicate with, and they sent this to me. So I'm happy to share their stuff with you guys, as long as it's good. And this drive is good. It's very good. And that brings us to the end. Well, what do you think? Do you like the idea of this sort of product? Does it appeal to you? Do you have any suggestions for what could be improved? I really enjoyed hearing your thoughts about the Batocera hard drive that I showed here before. So I'd love to hear what you think about this one in the comments below. And while you're down there, smash the thumbs up button if you liked the video, or don't if you didn't. This video has been brought to you by the patrons of TechDweeb. If you'd like to become a patron and support the things that I do, please check out the link in the description below. That's it for me. I'm TechDweeb. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye. Blah 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 blah.